The clock is ticking for President Cyril Ramaphosa as civil society organizations and grassroots activist groups across South Africa issue a stern warning: unless urgent and decisive action is taken against entrenched corruption, the country could soon be plunged into mass protests reminiscent of past waves of public anger. For years, ordinary South Africans have watched political scandals, shady procurement deals, and state capture revelations erode both public trust and national resources. Billions meant for development, healthcare, housing, and education have allegedly been siphoned off through corruption networks, while communities continue to live without proper infrastructure or opportunities. The result has been growing frustration, not only with those directly implicated in corruption but also with the leadership's perceived failure to ensure justice. Now, that frustration has coalesced into a movement. Coalitions of civil rights organizations, student groups, labor unions, and faith-based institutions are uniting under a single demand: accountability must no longer be delayed. These groups argue that President Ramaphosa's repeated promises to clean up government and root out corruption have yet to translate into real consequences for the powerful figures accused of wrongdoing. At a press briefing in Johannesburg this week, representatives from several prominent NGOs declared that they were giving the president a strict timeline to take visible steps in holding corrupt officials and business figures accountable. "South Africans are tired of rhetoric," one activist leader stated. "We are giving the president and his administration a limited countdown to demonstrate action. If nothing changes, we will take to the streets." The message is clear: public patience has run out. Many of these groups have long histories of mobilizing protest movements, and they argue that only organized civil pressure has the power to force real reform. The proposed demonstrations would be nationwide, bringing together rural communities and urban centers under a single banner of anti-corruption. Public sentiment at boiling point. The warning comes at a time when public anger is already high. Recent surveys indicate that a majority of citizens feel corruption has worsened over the last decade, with very few believing that leaders are truly being held accountable. Load shedding crises, poor service delivery, and unemployment only add to the sense of betrayal. For many, the issue is deeply personal. Communities see clinics without medicine, schools without proper facilities, and roads riddled with potholes, all while headlines are dominated by tales of misused funds and luxury lifestyles of the political elite. This disconnect has fueled not just anger, but a determination to demand answers. Civil groups push for concrete steps. The organizations leading the charge have laid out a series of demands for the Ramaphosa administration. These include swift prosecution of high-profile corruption cases that have stalled for years, greater transparency in government procurement and tender processes, stronger protection for whistleblowers, many of whom have faced threats or even assassination attempts, independent oversight bodies with real authority to monitor corruption investigations. They stress that failure to deliver on these demands will trigger what they describe as a new era of people-led accountability. Ramaphosa under pressure. For President Ramaphosa, the warning represents a critical test. He has long positioned himself as a reformist leader determined to restore integrity to South Africa's governance. Yet critics say his approach has been too cautious, too reliant on lengthy commissions and drawn-out investigations. The civil society ultimatum now threatens to expose that gap between rhetoric and action. Political analysts argue that mass protests could weaken Ramaphosa's credibility further, both domestically and on the international stage. At a time when South Africa faces economic uncertainty, such unrest could also discourage investment and deepen instability. Yet activists insist that the greater danger lies in doing nothing. A country where corruption continues unchecked risks losing its democratic promise altogether. The countdown to action. With the deadline looming, South Africans are watching closely to see whether the government will act decisively. Activists are already organizing logistics for potential protests, preparing placards, mobilizing volunteers, and coordinating social media campaigns to amplify their message. The mood is one of determination rather than desperation. Accountability is not optional, another activist declared. If leaders will not act, the people will remind them who they serve. The countdown has begun. What happens next could mark a defining moment for both President Ramaphosa and the future of South Africa's democracy.